This is what it feels like to experience guilt for surviving when others didn't. In other words, this is what it's like to experience a terrifyingly traumatic condition known as survivor's guilt. This is Shirou Emiya, a character with a severe case of survivor's guilt who will be referencing throughout the video. Welcome to a mini case study on the more forgotten mental illness that is survivor's guilt and its negative impacts on the people experiencing it. Alright, I just want to say, pause for a second. I'd like to say I'm not a doctor. This is a passion project that I decided to create using research from a variety of different websites that I'll put on the screen right now. Anyways, back to the video. Today we'll be looking at number 1, what is survivor's guilt and its causes. 2, the signs and symptoms shown by people with survivor's guilt. 3, how survivor's guilt affects the actions, behavior, and mental state of someone. 4, what affects the severity of survivor's guilt cases. And to lead this video off on a high note, how survivor's guilt can be treated in people like Shirou Emiya. Let's take a few steps back to the beginning and ask ourselves, what the hell even is survivor's guilt and how is it caused in the first place? Starting with what is survivor's guilt, the basic concept of survivor's guilt is the feelings of guilt someone has for witnessing others suffer when they did not. However, the definition I found that I personally like a lot more is stated by Julie Bailey, a mental clinic manager, who describes it as a form of PTSD with added guilt along with it. End quote. This statement is simple and describes... I hate this line. This statement is simple and describes perfectly what survivor's guilt actually is. In Shirou's case, he experiences traumatic thoughts to his past that he feels strong guilt for not being able to save the people that he witnessed suffer. This leads us into the cause of survivor's guilt, having a traumatic past experience to survive and feel guilty or responsible for. In this case, the event for Shirou is a huge fire in Fuyuki City that killed many people, where Shirou was one of the only ones to survive. Actually, he was the only one to survive. It's also the fact of not suffering, but others did. In the case of Shirou, the cause of guilt would be surviving the fire when others didn't, in which he was powerless to save anyone else. Shirou's case has a more severe cause, but survivor's guilt can be caused by more minor events where death does not take place. For example, someone at school being bullied in front of you that you can't do anything about. With a more minor cause, there will be a more minor case of survivor's guilt. But the other thing that impacts severity of survivor's guilt is the condition of the one suffering from it. Let's say someone has had trauma in the past, suffers from other conditions like depression, plus has no support of family or friends, and has substance abuse problems. They're guaranteed to have a more serious case of survivor's guilt than someone with 1, a loving family, friends, no past trauma, no other mental illness, and no problems with substance abuse. All these different factors factor into the severity of survivor's guilt. And so to put it in fully fleshed out terms, from a quote by me, Golden Giver Man, survivor's guilt is any event where suffering happens that triggers trauma and or guilt and or unnecessary feeling of responsibility in a person, with causes ranging from minor to major, in which the severity of the case depends on the cause and conditions of the person experiencing survivor's guilt. So now I know what survivor's guilt is and how it's caused. So now I know what survivor's guilt is and how it's caused. But how do you know when someone has this illness? Well, let's look at the symptoms and signs shown by Shirou Emiya, as well as some that he doesn't experience himself. First up is the most common sign of survivor's guilt that was actually in the beginning of the video: flashbacks, nightmares, and thoughts about the traumatic cause of your survivor's guilt. Every single person with survivor's guilt will experience these signs, and as for a more serious case like Shirou's, this symptom will be a very common occurrence. And this is especially true in the original show he is from. But not only that, during these flashbacks that Shirou has, the second major sign, the intrusive thoughts, kick in as seen in the intro. Thoughts and questions like, why was I the one to survive? Why wasn't I the one to suffer? If only I'd done something differently, I could have prevented this. I don't deserve to still be alive. We'll just go on and on and on and on, which is why I like to call these thoughts and flashbacks, as well as the guilt, the trademark of survivor's guilt. It only makes sense as 99% of people with this condition will experience it. It's also what separates survivor's guilt from other mental illnesses and is the easiest way to identify survivor's guilt in people like Shirou. Not to mention, most symptoms are directly caused by these main signs of survivor's guilt. Some of these direct symptoms are shown by Shirou Emiya, including obsessive or intrusive thoughts. Shirou exemplifies both intrusive thoughts, the thoughts we talked about earlier, and also obsessive thoughts, as you see him obsess over the event, and he feels like it's his duty to never allow anyone to suffer like that ever again, with the result of these obsessive thoughts being a partial reason as to why he wants to start his journey to be a hero of justice. This symptom is the most exemplified one that Shirou demonstrates to us in the show. However, I can't gloss over some other symptoms as well, which you will notice are derivatives of this main symptom. Next up is trouble concentrating. Oh my god, I cannot do this fucking line. Next up is trouble concentrating. Multiple times it becomes hard for Shirou to focus on his training, as he constantly has obsessive intrusive flashbacks to the fire from his childhood that pulls away his focus from training to the trauma. Another symptom is that feeling of helplessness or belief that in situations you didn't do enough to help. There are multiple times where Shirou feels as if he's powerless and has lost hope in certain situations, and though they may not be scenarios commonly experienced by us, not being able to defeat Hercules, still shows us the feelings of hopelessness and even despair that comes along with survivor's guilt. So it's as if survivor's guilt acts as a reinforcement to helpless thoughts that Shirou has. These are the symptoms Shirou exemplifies, but there are many others, including being easily made angry, which I know for a fact Shirou does not exemplify, because he can put up with Rin being the most annoying trick. Moving on, abrupt changes in mood. I don't have much to say about this symptom, but I swear to God, Rin has this problem without survivor's guilt. Anyways, loss of motivation. A tragedy could easily cause you to lose motivation to keep going and doing what you're doing. Increased disinterest in the things you used to enjoy. The guilt and constant love your ability to enjoy things in the moment. A sense of disconnection or detraction from others. This would be a traumatic symptom if a person reinforces that it was your fault for the traumatic event you came out of unscathed. Wanting to be isolated more often. This one is the next step to feeling disconnected from others, as the guilt will lead to the action of forcing yourself into that isolation. And in the most serious of cases, thoughts of suicide could slide into the intrusive thoughts caused by survivor's guilt. To sum up everything, the signs and symptoms of survivor's guilt are dramatically shown in the minds of the people affected by it, which leads us to the next area of focus for today's video. How can a mental illness like survivor's guilt affect the behavior of people like Shirou Emiya? Now let me know the signs and symptoms of survivor's guilt. How can it affect someone's actions and behavior? Well, I'm going to go on a limb here and say that survivor's guilt can lead to two extremes on the Golden Gary Man spectrum of survivor's guilt. One of them being demonstrated by Shirou Emiya, and the other one not so much. The first is the one I'll be using Shirou as a reference for. That one is that survivor's guilt can cause someone to act and behave in a way where they devalue their own life so they can devote it to saving/helping others. The other could be considered the opposite. It can force someone to isolate themselves from the world entirely, to hide from the pain and trauma of the past from ever happening again. Let's look at the first side of the spectrum. How could someone like survivor's guilt make someone devote their own lives to others? Suddenly we could train by flashbacks, visions, and intrusive thoughts, obsessive thoughts. Specifically thoughts like, what was the point of me surviving? Or I could have done something to prevent this. Or I don't deserve to be alive. Couldn't do act as the fuel for Shirou's desire to want to help others and save them. He feels like he's repaying the people that suffer when he did not by making sure nothing like that ever happens again. It's the justice that he wants to deal out for the people that suffer. It's like he's trying to answer the questions that intrude his mind, like the question, are they the ones that survived? Or I could have done something more to prevent this. He feels as though it is now his purpose to save as many people as he can for two reasons. One, to live to his dad, and two, to repay the people who suffered, to find an answer to the intrusive thoughts. In this case, Shirou finds hypothetical answers to these thoughts and questions, as there's truly no answer for the intrusive thoughts. His answer to the thoughts is to make sure nobody suffers like in his past ever again. If he dies trying to fulfill this, so be it. The countless people around Shirou are more important to him than his own life due to survivor's guilt. One thing I'm talking about isn't just because like Shinju abuses his behavior, and I actually hate that. But back to survivor's guilt. The guilt, thoughts, and flashbacks act as a fuel for his life devoted to helping others with a decreased value to his own life as a result. See, plenty of times Shirou disregards his own life just so that he doesn't have to relive the sight of others suffering when he did not. He even goes as far to sacrifice himself for a slim chance that nobody around him gets hurt, so that only a person with an extreme desire to save others because of past guilt and trauma would do. His actions and behaviors are dramatically favored towards the well-being of others rather than himself, as a result of the effect of survivor's guilt. I am the only one to survive that. I can't let anyone suffer again. You know, it could cost my life to do so. I ain't gonna lie, I made that quote up, but it sounded cool. So Shirou's character shows us one possibility to a very far extreme of how survivor's guilt could affect actions as well as behavior. But the opposite can be true for a person with survivor's guilt as well. It could cause someone to be overwhelmed and want to be left alone more often, or in the most serious of cases, isolate themselves completely. This of course causes them to change their actions and behaviors to ones where they can shut themselves out from reality and the people within it. Intrusive thoughts and trauma strike again, as those symptoms will bring about the behavioral symptoms pressuring people into isolation. These symptoms bring about symptoms causing behavioral shifts like feeling or being constantly disconnected from others around you, and also focused by constantly overwhelming with the past instead of the present. Survivor's guilt can bring about the loss of being able to be locked in the present moment. It's easier for someone to feel disconnected from their surroundings in the present. This could force the person affected by survivor's guilt to take actions to isolate themselves, or in less serious cases, just be around others less. Not to mention thoughts like I should have been the one to suffer and I shouldn't have survived that experience, will further pressure a person to act and behave in ways to put themselves into isolation. Even just the terror brought upon by survivor's guilt can be enough for someone to want to be alone. It is truly sad to think about, but that is how survivor's guilt can potentially make someone act and behave. In my opinion, this is the scarier side of the spectrum, because isolation with a condition like survivor's guilt can easily lead to suicide. It is a very extreme outcome and is very unsettling to think about. There are two extremes to survivor's guilt, but falling in between the two is very possible depending on the severity of the case, like we talked about earlier, but let's not dwell on it. I think it's about time we ended this on a happy note. Follow me into the world of how someone can treat survivor's guilt. It's time for a happy ending, I promise. Now we know just how badly survivor's guilt can potentially affect someone's actions and behavior, but I think it's time we figure out how we can save someone or help someone save themselves from the suffering that is survivor's guilt. Well, there are multiple things a person with survivor's guilt like Shirou can do to cope. The most important thing is being able to accept what happened the day the traumatic event happened, as well as your role in what happened that day. Later on, Shirou comes to accept the event, his role in it, and the outcomes of what happened in the past. This allows him to start to move on from the past event he went through. This is what must happen to fully cope with the symptoms of survivor's guilt. Acceptance of the event event, your role in it, and the outcome of it. To allow this to happen, the next few coping mechanisms can help someone like Shirou reach the point of acceptance. The first thing that can be done to cope with survivor's guilt is what we see Shirou do multiple times, is to make valuable relationships with people. For almost any mental illness, having even just one person to talk to and cope with makes dealing with things like survivor's guilt a lot easier. Simply sitting down with someone and talking about the events that happened can not only make someone experiencing survivor's guilt feel better, but it can also be able to make acceptance of the past traumatic event easier and come quicker. Pause on that. That being able to hang out with friends and make good memories can help someone with survivor's guilt get over the past in general. Something that can also tie into helping someone get over past events of survivor's guilt is to simply just do good things for the world, which Shirou seems to be an expert at. Whether that be through helping someone fix something, cleaning an archery dojo, or saving the entire world, doing good deeds is Shirou's forte and can really help anyone get over the guilt of the past by making good changes for the future. In general, doing good things, metaphorically speaking, helps fill the gaping hole of dread that survivor's guilt can make people like Shirou feel by filling it in with positive changes to the people's future. However, making changes for others is the only way to have a lasting effect on coping with survivor's guilt and reaching acceptance. Simply by taking action to care for your personal well-being by doing things you enjoy and things to care for yourself in general can make a huge difference as well. Shirou's case, doing things like magic training, working out, cooking, meditating, and other life activities allows him to take his mind off survivor's guilt and onto the more enjoyable parts of life that rather than make us feel despair, makes us feel blissful and delighted. However, if all else fails, the last resort is to seek professional help, but that will cost a pretty penny, which is scary for some people, such as Mr. Krabs. These are the 4 main ways of coping with survivor's guilt that can help someone reach acceptance, and if these things are applied, I'm guaranteeing that anyone can get over survivor's guilt and reach acceptance, which I'm glad to be able to say. And so, that should give us our happy ending like I promised. But wait, we're not done yet. To leave off this video, I want to read you all a message I found while researching for this video. Are you ready? Okay, here we go. Instead of punishing for yourself for making it through, try reframing your survival as a gift. One you can pay forward with gratitude and kindness towards others. Doing what you can to support loved ones, even strangers who continue to struggle, can add meaning and purpose to your life. End quote. It perfectly encapsulates Shirou as a character that had to overcome survivor's guilt. Never punish yourself for making it through something when others couldn't. Truly set yourself at peace with the events. Give back to others. Help people up when they suffer from then on, and there will be no reason for survivor's guilt to ever haunt you, ever again. My name is Golden Gamer Man, and this was a case study on Shirou Emiya and the effects of survivor's guilt on people like him. I hope you learned something interesting today, and I hope you all have a peaceful rest of your day doing good things in the world. And I'll catch you all in the next video soon. Golden Gamer Man out.